Alright, my friends, I'm Rick and this is your seat of the table, and just in case you missed the first time, we'll do this one again. Alright, so what we're saying is, hey, spoiler alert, right? So, this is Elements of Treason, Opportunity. And I read the first book, and first thing that came off right off the first thing that, first book was Duty, Elements of Treason, Duty. So I'm making the assumption that there's going to be a third book in this series, Elements of Treason. It's just a two-part. Because in theory, both these books technically are on the verge of being novellas. They're short, they're really short for a novel, which is fine. I mean, we don't always have to have, 500-page books and stuff. 150 pages barely makes it. There's a lot of contents in here that cheeses off quite a few people. And so, that's one of those things where we're going to say it again. Because, part of the problem is red herrings. And red herrings are kind of a slippery slope or a dangerous slope, depending on how you look at it. There's giving the fan base too much. Let's run down that rabbit hole, right? Giving the fan base too much opportunity for thinking back on things that are missing or lacking. So in this case, there's implications that Word of Blake or Comstar or some entity thereof is not completely gone at this point, and that they are working to regain some momentum and or position of some sort. And so there's a individual in here working for them, although it's not 100% stipulated as that. The wording and the way he talks to his superior is pretty clear, right? And it's that thing that really cheeses off a number of people, because if you go to the official CGL stance at this point is that Comstar and Word of Blake are dead entities and gone. Although I will note that they specifically are going on about Comstar being a dead faction. They're not saying that Word of Blake is a dead faction, or that factions within the factions of the Word of Blake couldn't potentially still be out there. It's a matter of take what you want, because it's not uncommon for Word of Blake operatives to refer to themselves as Comstar. Right? Just saying. So in that perspective, we have Duke Brewer of Hesperus II, whose family's been the hereditary dukes of that Lyran mega industrial world for centuries, and he's been displaced. There's a lot of his backstory that I'm still piecing together bits and pieces of. I haven't read the earlier novels that precede this stuff. He was for a very brief window the Archon of the Commonwealth, and then abdicated for an actual Merrick, just as the clans were dropping on Tharkad. So he basically was smart enough to beat feet than to end up sacrificing himself, like what's her name did, or was to do. And he is then kind of this homeless rogue warlord in a way. He's a homeless duke looking for a home. And so he returns to, quote, Melissia, which he's an earlier stomping ground of his back in the day, apparently, and involves himself in the current situation. Jade Falcon has rushed all of his Toman off to battle the wolves for control at Terra, and has more or less abandoned its holdings, and they're up for grabs. And so it's a land grab on a large scale across the portions of the inner sphere. And Brewer is looking at the opportunity to carve out another little kingdom, at least. And we've seen this in the previous book, Duty, where what's her name? And you have to go look at the video on it. Sarah, or whatever the hell her name is, and brings the entire Arcturian Guard command of some 15,000 people to Arcturus and sets up her own little petty kingdom. This is a common thing. it's also something to note because I think she's trying to resurrect the Tamer Pact. Brewer's going to do something similar. He's going to immediately grab as many of the nearby worlds and systems as he can. Some of them are vital to this the world of Melissa's operations, and others are just strategically good locations, and or to help create a buffer zone between the key world, it's the prime system, and everybody else. But they all have to be aware in the back of their brain at some point things are going to settle down or going to change, and the bigger factions are going to turn around and reabsorb these smaller factions. So these smaller factions are short-lived, whether they want to accept that or not. That's going to be probably a true fact. I can't 100% guarantee it because who knows what the overall advancing plan is for the next 15 years, 10 years for Battletech. That's in the purview of the Catalyst people. The possibility would be that Alec Ward, trying to resurrect his, quote, Star League, will recognize these smaller factions if they bend a knee to the Star League and become members of the Star League. That could be one potential way for these smaller factions to weather out and survive the long term. But if that doesn't occur, what people like Brewer and General Sarah, whatever her name is, and I might be using the first name incorrectly as well, are doing is what they think is right and or what's advantageous to themselves, putting themselves up in positions of power. The good general on Octurus was doing it reluctantly, whereas Brewer's doing it intentionally because he needs a power base. A duke without a world is not really a duke, is it? So in this case, he's trying to create a foundation for him to stay stable on and to weather whatever's coming down the road or down the gravity well. And in this case, he involves himself with the two various factions that's going on the planet. Like a lot of local stuff, they're all concerned about their local issues and don't worry about the bigger picture at the moment because that's not important to them until it becomes important. Fact is, any small individual faction, no matter how well established they are pretty much screwed when it comes to the bigger factions. So once a house decides he wants to reclaim your territory, they're coming for it. And can you prevent it? And how long can you prevent it? So in this case, this is kind of what we're looking at. So the downside of the book, of course, is that tax section where we're looking at this rogue elements of a defunct faction, potentially trying to find ways to revitalize their faction or bring it back to life. It also implies, this is where that red herring comes in, that there are elements of Comstar that are not dead and or Word of Blake that are not dead. And to carte blanche say that something's dead is kind of hard to do. It's easy for Catalyst to say, look, we're not going to focus on that stuff anymore. We have plenty of other things on our plate right now. So as far as we're concerned, it's a dead deal. But practicality is practicality. And no offense to other people's opinions on, well, once it's dead, it's always going to be dead. Or once it's dead, it should just stay dead. It doesn't always work out that way. And who knows what the future will bring. And it might become an opportunity. Something might present itself to want them to instigate or reintroduce an old faction, and or the possibility, hold on a second, would be a different variant of that. And so Word of Blake might have been more metamorphosed itself into yet another thing, or the Comstar might metamorphose itself into yet another thing. The original entity, the original structure, the original is finished, but from the ashes rise. So this is actually a pretty decent novel. I read through it fairly quickly. There's a couple moments in there it's kind of like, are you effing me? It's a little, Duty had a bit more of that in it than this one does. Hey, Craig, Mr. Reed here, he's got some skills. I'm not going to knock him. I know writing is a challenge, and some people it comes naturally, and some people it is a chore. You want to do this. Because if you have to do it, if you are doing something you really don't want to write about, it shows. That's just my personal opinion. It opens some windows, leaves some windows open, potentially opens a back door that's closed, but potentially could be utilized down the road. It's hard to say how that's going to play out. It's hard to say how the balance of the game is going to direct it in that way, if ever. The downside, of course, is I do agree throwing in that kind of red herring and then carte blanche saying, "Oh no, it was," is foolhardy. If Catalyst and look, no offense, Catalyst, I'm just saying, I'm nobody. What do I know, right? I surely don't have tens of thousands of freaking subscribers on my channel. I ain't ever gonna. But let's be honest here. You should never allow the writers to go and explore that direction and potentially put those windows in place or those back doors in place for a dead faction coming back, unless you really intend for that to be there. I mean, you can sit there and say, no, we're never bringing Comstar back. It is what it is. Factions come, factions die. Sometimes that makes the game more believable, better. It's better because there's the downside. See, this is where we get that Mary Sue shit. When we get characters that just seem to be totally, their opportunities and capabilities are grossly out of place, and or their inability to lose. Even when they lose, they win. That's fine once in a blue moon, but if it becomes the everyday thing or the average thing, this is why there's a large portion of people who don't like Clan Wolf anymore, because the Clan Wolf never loses. Even when they lose, they win. And once you've got that down, it just gets stale. So in the case of introducing the possibility of what's a herring but a fish? What happens to fishes after a couple of days? They start to stink. Is that? Oh, geez, our founding fathers. I want to keep saying Thomas Jefferson. I know it's not him. God damn it, he wasn't even in Congress. And I'll think of it when I don't need to think of his name too, because I know his damn name. Started the U.S. Post Office. Jesus, famous individual. He's the one that says, like, house guests are like fish, start to stink after 3 days. So, ideally, you don't put herrings in things unless they're there for legitimacy. And then if you allow them to be put in there and then go back, we're not going to, you shouldn't have let it have it in the first damn place. That's just my personal opinion. Now, if you did that on the what if scenario, we'll keep an open possibility door there, it still should have been played down a little bit more, because it plays out, it reads out toward the end of the book as if it was a done deal, that there is still some entity, some sliver of the Comstar faction in some form that's trying to resurge or trying to get that ember to ignite once more. And that's plausible. That is very plausible. Will it ever rise up to be what it was? No. Will it become some other problem for various other inner sphere factions? Yeah, and it also gives that bone to the supporters of those defunct factions once they're gone. But that's just my opinion on all this stuff. Of course, as is, you take it what you want. It's actually not a bad novel. I liked it. I probably will read it again at some point. Like I said, I don't generally buy novels to not read more than once, and it'll be a while though when I get around to doing it again, but it is what it is. Till next time. Going on, my friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry or gaming fandom that says, hey, this is a channel worth checking out, right? Till next time, I hope you guys have yourself